also coming up this hour. In business, the largest U.S. children's wear retailer cancels millions of dollars worth of clothing orders from suppliers in Ethiopia. And in sports, Senegal's first female professional surfer seeks to motivate young girls to join the sport. In our top story this hour, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has announced his resignation, citing health problems. He has apologized to the Japanese people for stepping down before completing his term. His term was due to end in September next year. Shinzo Abe has been the Prime Minister for nearly 8 years. The 65-year-old says his illness may not allow him to make important policy decisions for his people.
I have to make political decisions, the important ones. I cannot make any mistake in terms of the important decision making. The support of the public is I have to respond to. So I'm not ready to respond to the mandate by the public. And I made a judgment I should not continue my job as a Prime Minister. I decided to step down as a Prime Minister.
Shinzo Abe has served the longest uninterrupted term as Prime Minister in the country's history. Let's take a look at his political career.
Shinzo Abe, a third-generation politician, first taking office as Prime Minister in 2006. Abe is the first Japanese government leader born after the Second World War. During his first term, scandals surrounded his cabinet. Support rate dropped as low as 28%, and the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, or the LDP, suffered a major loss in the upper house election in 2007. He resigned soon after, citing poor health and saying his presence was hindering the passage of essential bills. He was blamed for creating the so-called revolving door of prime ministers, 6 leaders in 6 years, until his second term began in 2012. Ironically, he had since become the longest-serving Prime Minister in Japanese history. Experts say the reform of multi-seat electoral districts and changes to campaign finance rules weakened the traditional factional influences in the LDP. Abe secured an unchallenged leadership in the ruling party. He gained public support with promises of an economic recovery. The so-called Abenomics was based on 3 arrows of monetary easing, fiscal stimulus and structural reforms. The public was desperate to crawl out of the prolonged deflation from the earthquake and tsunami that devastated the eastern coast of Japan. Corporate sentiments improved and Nikkei stock average made a steady recovery, more than doubling to over 23,000 in 2020 since he began his second term, despite inertia from the 2008 global recession. Analysts say Abe was cunning in balancing economic achievements, social welfare schemes, and aggressive diplomacy to boost Japanese exports, which maintained public support, while forcefully passing a number of unpopular security and defense-related bills. Tens of thousands have taken to the streets demanding him to step down. There was an anti-nuclear power demonstration in 2014, followed a year later by protests over so-called war legislations in 2015, and favoritism scandal in 2018. But despite these, he managed to win in elections and maintaining a clear majority in both the upper and lower houses. In 2017, after President Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific talks, Abe tried to take the lead in the negotiations. He also tried to build stronger trade cooperations with China and another free trade agreement in the Asian Pacific, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Although Abe continued to stress the importance of the Japan-US alliance, the country steadily increased its defense arsenal, reducing its reliance on the US military. Abe's plan to revise Article 9 of Japan's pacifist constitution and increase its military budget raised concerns both at home and abroad. With the COVID-19 pandemic, analysts say the fruits of Abenomics have been considerably reduced, raising debate over Abe's legacy. With economic recovery still stagnant, many unsolved issues with neighbors, and relations with the US not as strong as before, constitutional revision has not made any progress. Japanese media say with all these challenges, Abe's successor might be drawing the short straw. Terence Teoshima, CGTN, Tokyo.
Well, Beijing, meanwhile, says it would like to further improve relations with Japan amid news of Abe's resignation. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson declined to make direct comments, citing internal affairs. But both countries have helped one another in the fight against the coronavirus, and Sino-Japanese ties have warmed despite historical tensions. Well, let's move to Ethiopia now, and reports indicate that the United States has withdrawn some funding to Ethiopia as the Grand Renaissance Dam dispute rages on. The decision comes days after United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Sudan and asked the parties to work towards a mutual agreement on the filling of the dam. Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia have resumed online negotiations seeking to end the dam dispute. The talks are being mediated by the African Union. The continental body seeks to resolve a years-long dispute over Ethiopia's giant hydroelectric dam. Ethiopia has built the dam on the Blue Nile and has started filling the reservoir. Both Egypt and Sudan say the construction will have profound effects on their own water supplies from the Nile River. Years of talks between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan with a variety of mediators, including the Trump administration, have failed to produce a solution. Well, let's bring you more details now on these latest developments. I'm joined by our correspondents, Girum Chala, live with us in Addis Ababa, as well as Adel Al-Mahroui, who joins us from Cairo. Girum, let's start with you. Certainly significant developments in the past few days. Just talk us through the details of what has happened between the U.S. and Ethiopia.
Lindy, thank you so much. As you have said in your intro, the United States decision, if it's going to hold water, is going to cut about $130 million of funding, direct funding to the Ethiopian government. That assistance is going to also affect several areas, including peace and security efforts, anti-terrorism efforts, anti-human trafficking schemes, and also general development activities in this country, which are supported by the United States government. And this is something that is going to also affect lives on a lower level as well, because the trickle-down effect is obviously going to be very big, and the United States decision is going to disrupt so many lives. That's what analysts are telling us. But many also hope that this story may be something that is premature, and the U.S. might reconsider its decisions. But for now, what we know from about $800 million that the United States provides as a development fund for Ethiopia, about $130 million might be axed due to the confusion or the unhappiness of the United States on the talks over the Nile waters between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan, Lindy.
And so potentially dire consequences then for Ethiopia should the U.S. go ahead and withdraw this funding. How is the Ethiopian government reacting to this?
Well, at the moment, there is no official reaction. I've been trying to speak to Ethiopian Minister of Foreign Affairs and even the press secretary of the Prime Minister's office itself. So there is no official response. But on the side, we are hearing that there is a huge unhappiness from Ethiopian officials on every level, saying that this is a clear testimony of the United States' partiality rather than of its impartiality in the talks over the GERD, that is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and say that the United States must reconsider its decisions if this is going to be implemented in the near future. And some officials also talk of the fact that there might be a light at the end of a tunnel when it comes to the cut of these funds, as it may not pass or it may face a huge challenge at Capitol here. U.S. lawmakers, so many of them, might oppose this decision because, as you know, Ethiopia is a strategic partner to the United States, especially when it comes to the anti-terrorism efforts in this region. So a friend should not be treated this way, is what we are hearing from so many U.S. officials, and this may not pass. That's the hope from the Ethiopian officials. On the other hand, some are also saying, Lindy, that Ethiopia is the one which brought the talks over the Nile from Washington, D.C. back to Addis Ababa to the African Union headquarters, saying that this is an African problem. It requires an African decision, which obviously made U.S. officials, the Trump administration, unhappy, and one of the contributing factors for the fundings to be cut. So the overall situation here when it comes to the cutting of these funds is unhappiness, and hope with the fact that the U.S. officials, Trump administration more particularly, will revisit its decisions, and this is not going to be implemented, Lindy.
Well, let's find out what the view is on the Egyptian side of this dispute. Let's bring in Adele now into the conversation, who joins us live from Cairo. Adele, some critics saying that this is an African problem requiring African solutions. We know, of course, that Mike Pompeo has been involved in some of these talks. But what is the feeling right now, the reaction in Cairo to the US's latest decision?
Well, like in Addis Ababa, there hasn't been any official response yet from Cairo. This news is just at least 12 hours old, and therefore on a Friday and the weekend is approaching, the government has not yet issued from all levels, from the foreign ministry up to the presidency, any comment on it. And it's maybe unlikely for the government to comment on it. The concern for Egypt goes beyond about what is the details between the United States and Ethiopia, but what Egypt is looking forward to is the resumption of talks and reaching a solution in the soonest possible way.
And of course, we know that the U.S. has been involved in brokering talks in this dispute for some time. But the United States has been accused of being a partisan arbiter and not being impartial in this dispute. How is that going to affect talks in the future?
So the accusations come from Ethiopia, namely, but the United States has been leading talks between the three countries, listening to and suggesting its own views to this standoff, that the deadlock that has been reached for the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. Egypt has been primarily the key player here to request the interference of a foreign player in general, as the talks between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan alone reached a deadlock. After the United States round of talks, which according to Egypt was reaching breakthroughs, which reaching a fair solution from Egyptian and Ethiopian perspective as well, but Ethiopia was the one that did not sign and move forward. Egypt then moved to the African Union, hoping that an African-led effort could reach a solution, but yet again, so far, until we're speaking now, there are no significant breakthroughs that give any indication that Ethiopia might consider the concerns that Egypt and Sudan are having, and that's the key issue. Egypt is not fearing that, or they don't have any reservation, it and Sudan, about the construction of the dam. The entire issue now is about filling the reservoir. Once they fill the reservoir, it means they will block water from the Blue Nile, and therefore blocking water going to Sudan and from Sudan to Egypt. And this is where the main concern is, and this is what Egypt and Sudan have been trying to reach. They want a legally binding agreement. This is something that they've been trying to convince Ethiopia with, so that if any sort of violations happen, there will be a legal mechanism to resolve any future disputes. This is what Egypt, Sudan have been wanting, to have a final solution, not just an agreement, but a solution that can guarantee that in the future, no matter what happens, the three countries can resolve this peacefully.
It's clear that some tough negotiation still lies ahead. Thanks very much to Adel Al-Makhraoui joining us there in Cairo, and Gurum Chalo live with us there from Addis Ababa. Now, turning to other news, leaders of the Economic Community of West African States are holding another extraordinary summit to discuss the situation in Mali following a coup. The virtual summit will decide whether to increase pressure on the coup leaders. The regional bloc, ECOWAS, strongly condemned the developments in Mali and demanded the release of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta from detention. The coup leaders have since released the ousted leader. They have, however, requested to stay in power for a 3-year transition period before the country can hold elections. ECOWAS has insisted that an interim government should only be in place for a maximum of 1 year. Well, let's now go to Abuja for the latest on this story. We're joined by our correspondent, Phil Ihaza. Phil, tell us more about this meeting. What are the expected outcomes of this next extraordinary summit?
Well, thank you. It is expected that the mediators from ECOWAS this time will try to pin down on a timeline of this long talked about transitional government for Mali, because of course the ECOWAS has maintained strongly that they frown against the military regime even at this age and time in any of its nations in the West African bloc. So that is one of the key focuses for this meeting that we're expecting the ECOWAS to arrive at, and of course the representatives of the military junta. So they will want to pin down on a timeline. The ECOWAS has proposed a 6 months minimum and 12 months maximum timeline for the military to transit to another government that would ensure democratic processes in place. Also, we expect to know the person or group of persons that are supposed to take the reins of power, to ensure this transitional government works and ensure free, fair and credible elections are taking place. Now, ECOWAS will want to be involved in who those persons are, how credible they are, how capable they are as well. We'll also expect to see or to know the outcome of sanctions imposed by the ECOWAS bloc, because at the moment it's 10 days since these sanctions have been imposed, and of course it's expected that Mali are already feeling the ripple effect of these sanctions, especially economically. So we would also know if the release of President Keïta a day ago, that's yesterday, is something the junta will want to did to get the ECOWAS to some sort of listen to some of their reasons, give in to some of their requests, or they did that to let the ECOWAS team know that they are actually also involved in this process to ensure Mali comes back to a peaceful and very stable country, as they've been saying.
Thank you so much, Phil Ihaza, joining us there live from Abuja. You are watching Africa Live. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, record floods kill dozens and destroy thousands of homes in Sudan. And we tell you about the unlikely heroes in Tunisia's fight against the coronavirus. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Welcome back. We start in Sudan now, where residents of the capital Khartoum are struggling to stay above water. Floodwaters have reached the highest levels on record. Flooding has killed dozens of people, with authorities saying more than 18,000 homes have been destroyed or damaged.
Flooding regularly hits Sudan in summer. But residents say they have never experienced what's happening now. And the damage is catastrophic. The unprecedented water levels have left larger tracts of farmland submerged and thousands of residents homeless.
I have never seen flooding like this. Only the flooding of 1948. But this is a new situation. The authorities came and they saw this scene. They provided us with soil and sacks. I said, God bless you. But we failed to block the water and the houses were destroyed.
There is always flooding, but never like this. This year we had a huge increase, and I can say that we're afraid of it. As you can see, he's trying to remove water from the house, and no matter how much water he removes, it keeps on coming back from the sea.
The average level of the Blue Nile has reached 17.43 meters, the highest since the country started measuring in 1912. Authorities have warned it will continue to rise in the coming days. That has sparked fears that the flooding will increase the possibilities of disease outbreaks amid the coronavirus pandemic. Chomgono, CGTN.
Well, similar challenges in Niger, where several areas of the capital Niamey remain flooded as the death toll from recent floods rose to 45. The floods have displaced over 225,000 people, with 25,000 households affected. This, according to a statement from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. Heavy rains on Tuesday and Wednesday caused the Niger River to burst its banks. Dozens of residents were forced to wade or swim as they fled their homes on Thursday. Niger is considered one of the driest and poorest countries and often receives intense rains that last 2 to 3 months. Meanwhile, here in Kenya, hundreds of people in the northern county of Turkana have been asked to relocate to higher ground as the Turkwal River's water levels rise to unprecedented levels. And as CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports, there is widespread concern over the development as the river supports the livelihoods of hundreds of people and is crucial for many sectors within the region.
Nestled in Kenya's northern county of Turkana, River Turkwal is rising and rising fast. Levels have reached unprecedented heights as a result of heavy rains. Turkwal Dam, which is expected to spill over at 1,150 meters above sea level, has already reached 1,146 meters and is still rising, pointing to an imminent risk of a spillover.
We didn't expect this so much. We didn't expect this to happen that soon. But the way the weather changes are taking place, it is very possible that we can have a spill. My advice to the people downstream in Turkana is that they should be alert and they should be ready to move. And if possible, they should even start moving towards the high hills.
Turkwal River supports agriculture through the provision of irrigation, water for domestic use, fisheries, and hydroelectricity supply. But with the possibility of disaster due to the dam's expected overflow, county leaders are not waiting for the worst to happen.
We have talked to the people, advised them to move to higher ground. So we are monitoring the level of the dam every single day, in fact twice a day, in the morning, in the evening.
According to authorities, the move is aimed at avoiding future disasters that could hit the county hard. There are growing fears that the rising water levels could cause havoc in the coming weeks and months unless action is taken, and taken now. The spillover, it is feared, could affect more than 50% of the population who depend on River Turkwal for their livelihoods, especially those living downstream. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
The Egyptian Elections Committee says it plans to prosecute 54 million people for not voting in this month's Senate polls. Only 14% of registered voters turned out for the two-day exercise. And according to Egyptian law, those who fail to vote should be fined unless they give good reasons as to why they did not participate. CGTN's Adel Al-Makhraoui tells us more.
More than half the Egyptian population could get prosecuted for not casting their ballot in the Senate election held earlier this month. The law stipulates that citizens who do not vote should be fined up to $31.5. That means if all those who fail to vote get fined, that could translate in $1.7 billion being raised through fines by the government.
The purpose of the law is not to push for fines, but rather create incentives for citizens to participate in the elections and increase the turnout. This is legislation, and the Elections Committee has to follow the procedures which the law enforces. The implementation of the fines is very hard because it has not been done before, and the numbers involved are very high.
According to the election law, citizens have the right to appeal against a fine. They're allowed by law to skip voting if they have a valid reason, such as travel, work commitment, or if they were sick. The Egyptian prosecution will have the huge task of investigating 54 million different cases on top of its already piled up workload.
It could be an additional burden, but it's the law and it has to be done. The prosecution has to issue the fine, then it moves it to court. The prosecution has the right to push for trial or not. If it wants, the prosecution will launch a quick investigation. I don't think it can go case by case.
Since 2011, the voting fines have always been an issue after all elections, but the fines have never been imposed. Yet it's still a subject that sparks debate in the Egyptian streets.
They must know why people didn't vote. For me, the voting centers were far from my new residence. The government is the reason the voting wasn't easy for us. It is unjust to impose fines. I wish the president would stop this process. People do not have enough money to get food. They can't pay fines. That should not happen. It's not fair.
Only 9 million Egyptians voted in the Senate election to choose 200 members. The Egyptian president appoints the remaining 100 members of the upper house. It only enjoys an advisory role. Therefore, it has much less power than the House of Representatives. It has become the norm for the fines issued to erupt after every election in Egypt. But because only 14% turned out to vote for the Senate, much more Egyptians could relate to it this time. Adel al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shone the spotlight on some professions that had been given little attention until their key role in curbing the spread of the disease became more acknowledged. Hospital cleaners in Tunisia are among those now considered heroes because they risk their lives daily to provide a safe environment for patients and medical staff. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi tells us more.
Rabia is a hospital cleaner at one of the COVID-19 centers in the capital city Tunis, wearing the protective gear and disinfecting all surfaces and floors several times during the workday has become a routine for her. The cleaner remains cautious to avoid any mistake while repeating the same health protocol.
As cleaners in COVID-19 centers, we've worked hard. We were not afraid while we could get infected and transmit the virus to our families. Sometimes we lacked some equipment and transport was not available. Cleaners made many sacrifices so the doctors and nurses could work.
Since the peak of the first wave of infection in spring, Rabia has been repeating the same movements and respecting a strict sanitary protocol in order to provide the best conditions for infected pregnant women and newborns.
Cleaning the room of a coronavirus patient is not easy. Cleaners must ensure that the room is disinfected to prevent the spread of the virus to the medical staff and to ourselves. It's a high-risk job. Sometimes we lack some recognition, but we're doing this work for our country.
Hafez Dakhlawi is one of the senior officials at the Ministry of Health in Tunisia. One of his main tasks is ensuring that all the prevention measures are being respected by the personnel.
The safety of our staff is the first priority. We have provided the necessary training and equipment, face masks, hand sanitizers and the protective gear. I thank all the dedicated frontline workers who risk their lives by working directly with infected patients, especially pregnant women.
According to the National Observatory for New and Emerging Diseases, the recent cases were infected in workplaces where the health protocol was not applied rigorously. Only dozens of frontline workers have been infected since March. Tunisian health authorities have warned that a second wave of infections could hit the country within 3 weeks. The Syndicate of Hospital Cleaners has urged the Ministry of Health and the COVID-19 task force to hire hundreds of new cleaners because the current workforce has been overwhelmed. Abdel Shawaji, CGTN, Tunis.
And coming up in your business news, up next. The largest U.S. children's wear retailer cancels millions of dollars worth of clothing orders from suppliers in Ethiopia.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, the largest children's wear retailer in the U.S., The Children's Place, has cancelled millions of dollars worth of clothing orders from suppliers in Ethiopia. The retailer attributes the cancellation of the imports to the severe impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The move has pushed companies into ballooning debt as employees face heavy pay cuts. Wages in Ethiopia are estimated at $26 a month. That's compared to about $95 in Bangladesh and $326 in China. Ethiopian suppliers claim that TCP has demanded refunds on products that had been shipped before the crisis. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, the country's state-owned telecom provider is targeting more subscriber-based growth to more than 52 million people as it accelerates expansion. Ethio Telecom shrugged off the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic to record $1.4 billion in revenues from the year to June 2020. This was 105% above its target. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
With more than 45 million subscribers at the moment, Ethio Telecom is one of the largest telecommunications service operators in Africa. Ethio Telecom's ambition is to increase more subscribers and is targeting to close the year with 52.1 million customers as it upscales its expansion and service delivery in one of Africa's fastest growing telecommunications industry.
The demand from our people for the service we provide, including internet access, is significantly increasing. That is why we have prepared our customer increment plan based on this desire from the public. Besides that, the very evolving technological advancement will also be very helpful to achieve our plans sooner.
So based on its plans, Ethio Telecom is expected to deliver mobile services from 44.5 million customers to 49.7 million. That is an 11.8% increase. Mobile internet services from 23.5 million to 27.4 million customers. That is again a 16.5% increase. The state-owned telecom company is one of the biggest corporations in Ethiopia and generates vital revenue for Africa's second most populous nation with more than 105 million people. The Addis Ababa-based government-owned company managed to collect a revenue of 47.7 billion birr. That is equivalent to 1.4 billion US dollars. And now, with more investments set to be made on its telecom infrastructure, revenue is expected to rise even higher next year.
Based on our plan, revenue is expected to reach 55.5 billion birr, in this new budget year. That is an increase of about 16%. A 52 million customer number is also another target we have for the year, which is an increase of 13%. To achieve this and other plans, we have lots of projects at hand being implemented to improve service, accessibility, and increase customer satisfaction.
Last June, Ethiopia made an official invitation to foreign telecom operators to buy a 40% stake in Ethio Telecom. Ethiopia's telecom regulatory says it has already received a dozen applications from other telecom giants in the continent that are eyeing one of the country's most profitable state-run companies. Group Jala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
3 more Kenyan airlines have been banned in Tanzania as the standoff over the management of the COVID-19 pandemic between the two countries continues. The Tanzania Civil Aviation Authority issued the ban against Air Kenya Express, Fly 540 and SafariLink Aviation. And this comes as China just released a statement requiring all travelers from Tanzania to obtain a negative COVID-19 certificate before entering the country. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
The Tanzanian Civil Aviation Authority has revealed that the basis of its decision to nullify approval for the 3 Kenyan airlines is an ongoing dispute between the two countries. Kenya and Tanzania have been in disagreement over the handling of passengers arriving from Tanzania. Kenya had excluded Tanzania from the list of countries whose nationals would allow entry upon revision of coronavirus restrictions. It's not clear why, but experts say this could be due to Tanzania not locking down or releasing COVID-19 stats frequently. Following that decision, Tanzania cancelled plans to allow the national carrier KQ or Kenya Airways to resume flights to Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar. Meanwhile, China has announced that all China-bound passengers from Tanzania would have to obtain COVID-19 negative certificates before boarding flights. The Chinese embassy has cautioned that travelers who fail to show a negative COVID-19 certificate or valid health declaration form will be denied to board the flight. According to the statement with effect from September 4th, all passengers traveling from or transiting through Tanzania to China are required to obtain COVID-19 negative certificates prior to flight departures. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And to Tunisia now, where TikTok users in the North African country see the popular video sharing app owned by Chinese firm ByteDance as a window into the world. Many youth in the country claim they've become famous on the platform and made new friends globally. The Tunisian users have criticized the US threat to ban the popular app. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi brings us that story.
With over 1.5 million followers, Emna is one of the most successful TikTok users in Tunisia and North Africa. The 24-year-old digital content creator has been making videos for over 2 years. Now she's a full-time TikTok user who spreads love and creativity through her account.
Any ordinary person can show their hidden creative side. One can act, sing, and dance. TikTok is a world of unlimited talent.
Many TikTok stars in Tunisia often produce group videos to raise awareness among their online community for important causes. The coronavirus crisis has devastated the tourism sector in the country. Khaled and Emna are promoting tourism through their accounts. They are making videos to invite people to visit Tunisia.
Any TikTok user can make videos individually or work in groups. It's a space where people can serve noble causes through art and talent. It's very simple and easy to reach millions of people. We are serving our country through TikTok.
Khaled and his friend Emna, as well as many TikTok users in Tunisia, have denounced the US president's threat to ban the popular app. They say the move has even encouraged more people to download and discover the app.
TikTok is a successful Chinese enterprise. Trump wants to block Chinese innovation and technology. It's a failed political maneuver. Our generation does not listen to Trump. TikTok will remain our favorite app.
The Trump so-called TikTok ban has had the opposite effect. Now, there are millions of new users, especially youths, are downloading the app. Trump cannot stop TikTok because it is a space of freedom.
TikTok has opened the door for many users to gain fame on social media and in real life. Tunisian users cling to this virtual world, which is bringing people together and embracing the principles of tolerance, diversity, and coexistence. Experts assert that TikTok's simple video making process quickly turned it into a mainstay in internet culture. Tunisian users believe that the app's popularity in the world is growing even further after Trump's threat to ban it in the US. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
It's time now for a short break. Still more news ahead on Africa Live.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Vikash Purma is a scuba diving instructor on the island of Mauritius.
When you go underwater, you are living the actual moment. Because when you're down there, you're not in contact with whatever trouble you've got, whatever is there.
He is a popular teacher with locals, as well as with international visitors. For Vikash, the underwater world is a place where everyone is equal. Yet he finds that society itself is not always perfect.
No one is better than A, B, or C.
I don't say that one. I say that the reality.
Podcasting has become immensely popular since it was launched almost 2 decades ago. Today, it offers millions of different offerings to listeners worldwide. But in South Africa, podcasting has reached a new level and now offers the deaf community an opportunity to enjoy audio files uploaded on different platforms. Sumitra Naidu takes a look.
In history, the beginning of season 2. And
a podcast is a digital audio file that a user can download to a personal device for easy listening. How then does a deaf person enjoy a podcast? Thuli Zikalala, an accredited interpreter in South Africa, collaborated with Cliff Central, a digital radio platform, to produce the very first sign language interpreted podcast.
Castle of Bran, Vlad Dracul had impaled 20,000.
This is a big responsibility in terms of bringing awareness to organizations and to digital online platforms to say that your content is amazing, it's a wealth of knowledge, but it's a big barrier to, an entire community. It's very limited, a lot of content is presented in a specific way, or even limited. They don't have the option to choose.
So to blind history, the beginning of season.
For each episode, Zikalala takes the audio and shoots a video over it, interpreting the content in sign language, making it a visual element. For Zikalala, this is a breakthrough for the deaf community.
Content in its entirety is not designed for deaf people. It's not designed for people who've got hearing problems or hard of hearing, because it's spoken. I'm a podcast as a whole, like people speak, so they don't consider subtitles, they don't consider having an interpreter.
Thank you, Thuli, for your continued hard work of posting your videos on your statuses. One suggestion could be sharing more of your videos on Instagram or Facebook to get wider reach.
I guess, we as interpreters, we have a very important and a big responsibility in terms of bridging information. So we take information from one culture and we have to make sure that it's accessible to another culture.
Podcasts are becoming so popular that they're even starting to compete with traditional media. According to Edison Research, 10% of all metropolitan South Africans listen to any podcast in a typical month. It's still a far way off from the 33% of people in the United States, but the figures are rising steadily and starting to become more inclusive with these new deaf podcasts. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's take a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, Senegal's first female professional surfer seeks to motivate young girls into joining the sport.
How would you create your legend?